Welcome back, everybody. In this video, we're going to go over the idea of simple interest along with some examples. So first of all, what interest is a fee paid for the use of money over a period of time. So if you borrow money from the bank or a store or a person, then they don't have the use of that money while you have it. And so they get compensated by the payment called interest. If, on the other hand, you're receiving on the receiving end, for example, you put your money in the bank into a savings account or a certificate of deposit or some other kind of savings vehicle, then you don't have the use of your money. You can't spend it because the bank has it. And so to compensate you, the bank pays you a little bit of money in return. So there's different ways that you can calculate interest, simple interest, and compound interest. Compound interest we'll deal with another time. This video is about simple interest. Simple interest is called that because its calculation is relatively simple. There's a couple of different components that go into the calculation of interest. The first one is going to be principal. In our formula, that's going to be P. That is the amount of money either borrowed or lent. And if you think about it, the amount of interest that you might earn or have to pay depends on how much money is involved. If you're going to buy a car for $18,000, you're talking a lot of money. And so there should be a lot more interest than if you're borrowing $150. Okay, that's principal. By the way, for principal, this is principal spelled with the PAL at the end. That would be like the principal's office or principal meaning main, that use or that word principal. This isn't principal with the PLE on the end. That one is like you have high principles, you have or something you believe in. It's a good idea to get the correct word right. It conveys a good impression if you don't use the wrong word in this context. Okay, so principal, PAL, that's going to be the amount of money either borrowed or lent. The interest rate, that is expressed in our formula as a decimal. That is going to be set by agreement between the borrower and the lender. Usually whoever has the most power is going to be the one really setting the rate, usually the bank. Or if you're lending your money to your friend, you can decide what the interest rate should be. Of course, if you decide to charge too much, the person can get money from somewhere else. So there's a little bit of a mutualness about setting the interest rate. Usually, though, the person with the money is the one setting the rate. The other facet of the calculation is going to be time, which is T in our formula. That's the amount of time the money is borrowed. If you're going to borrow the money, $600 for 6 months, you're going to be using that money for 6 months. If you borrow $600 until next Friday when you get paid, then that's a lot less time, and so it should earn less interest. An important thing to note is that the units on the rate, the interest rate, percent per year or percent per month or whatever, need to match the units on the time. And we'll discuss that more in a minute when we have an example. So the formula is I equals P times R times T. The dollar amount of interest is the principal multiplied by the rate turned into a decimal, multiplied by the time. And there again, the rate units and time units need to match. Okay, so let's see an example of how this might work out. In this example, Vanessa lends her cousin $2,000 at 4% simple interest for 2 years. If it doesn't say 4% per month or 4% annually or 4% per week or whatever, you can assume that's per year. So this is 4% per year, and it's telling us that it's simple interest, and the amount of time she's going to have the money is, or lend the money to the cousin is 2 years. We want to know how much interest she's going to earn and how much altogether is going to be paid back. So let's start by calculating the interest. The interest is principal times rate times time. Here the principal is $2,000. The rate as a decimal is 0.04. And then the time is going to be 2 years. Okay, so let's go ahead and multiply that all out. Okay, so that's $160. This is going to be the amount of interest. And then, of course, Vanessa is going to want her original $2,000 back, not just the $160. So the cousin will pay back $2,160. The original $2,000 plus the $160 in interest. Okay, another example. Okay, this one is a little bit more involved, but it'll be good. All right, so here it says Carlos buys a used car from a friend for $4,500, and he's going to borrow the money really at 2.5% simple interest. He's going to make monthly payments for 4 years, then the car will be paid off. We want to find the total cost of the financing and Carlos's monthly payment. Before we get into it, I did want to mention that there's different ways that something like this can be calculated. The way that you would buy a car from a dealership and they might calculate the payment is different from the way that we're going to do it here. It involves compound interest, which, as I said, is something we'll deal with at another time. This is basically just simple interest. So this would be like, in this case, between private parties, how the interest would be calculated. Okay, also, if you think about it, he's going to be paying back this $4,500 over this 4-year period. So it's not like he's borrowing the $4,500 for the whole 4 years, but we're going to calculate it as if he is. So that's, of course, not to Carlos's advantage, but that's sadly the way that it goes. So let's go ahead and take a look. So the interest that he's going to pay is principal times rate times time. The principal is $4,500. The interest rate, 0.025, 2.5%. And then the time is going to be for 4 years. Okay, so let's see. All right, let's see what the total amount of interest is going to be. Okay, that'll be $450. Okay. So the total cost of the financing then is going to be $450. The total amount altogether is the $4,500 plus the $450 in interest. And he's going to make monthly payments for 4 years. There's 12 months in a year. For 4 years, that's going to be 48 months. 48 payments per. All right, so it's going to be about $103.13. Okay, that is going to be the size of Carlos's payment. And here what we've done is we've taken that $450 in interest and added a little bit to each of his 48 payments. Okay, all right, so that's that example. Like I said, how this is done when you buy a car from a business, like a car dealership or something, the calculation is different. That is the subject for another video. Okay. All right. So example, Natalie borrows $1,800 to buy a couch at 5% simple interest for 18 months. We want to find the total interest paid and the total that Natalie will pay back. So that's going to include, of course, the $1,800 that she borrows. So the issue here, when we go to calculate principal times rate times time, is, as I'd said earlier, the time units need to match. That is the 5% simple interest, that's an annual rate, and we're given 18 months. So if I were to go 1,800 times 0.05 times 18, that would be wrong. What's wrong about it is, aside from the fact that we're going to get the wrong answer, what's wrong about it is that the time units don't match. This is 5% per year for 18 months. Instead, what we need to do is have the time turned into an annual or fraction of a year. So the 18 months is 1.5 years. Now that's 5% per year for 1.5 years. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay, so that's $135 in interest. So she's going to pay back $1,800 plus the $135. Okay, so that's $1,935 altogether that she will pay back. Okay, so to elaborate a little bit on the issue with the time units, using a whole nother subject altogether, but that will make it clear. Let's say that you have a job where you make $20 an hour, just to keep it simple. And then let's say that you go to work one day and you have to study for your math test or something like that. And so your boss decides to let you go home after only being there for 15 minutes. I realize that this is just made up and contrived and all, but it works. So let's say that you leave after 15 minutes. Okay. So to calculate your pay for this, how would you do it? Of course, you can't just say, okay, well, it's 15 minutes and $20 an hour, because then you're going to make $300, right? I wish. Right? That would be great. But it doesn't work that way, right? Why? Because if you make $20 an hour and you work for 15 minutes, you either need to figure out how much you make per minute and then multiply that by 15. Usually people don't want to do that. Or turn that $20 an hour, leave the $20 an hour rather, and turn the 15 minutes into a fraction of an hour. 15 minutes, that's a quarter of an hour. And so thinking it through, it should make sense that, well, you're only going to make $5 for that 15 minutes based on working for $20 an hour. So again, the time units need to match. If you have $20 per hour, then what you're multiplying by needs to be in hours. That's what happened here in this example involving Natalie, is her 5% per year, we needed to multiply by years, not by 18 months. Okay, so as again, make sure that the time units match on your calculations. All right, that takes us to the end of our look at simple interest. Couple things to be careful of, like I said, about the units. Also in the calculations, make sure that you're turning those interest rates straight into decimals. So you'll see here there's a 0.05 and not just a 5. And also make sure you pay attention to what the question is asking. Are you asked, like in this case, how much interest Natalie pays, which is the $135, or are you asked how much altogether is paid back, in this case, the $1,935. All right, so that's the end of that. Let me know if you have any questions, and then have a great day.